Japanese automakers Honda and Nissan have announced plans to join forces.
Honda and Nissan announced on Monday that they have formally agreed to hold talks on a possible merger.
While the world races toward electric vehicles, Honda's CEO claims that the company has a new engine that could disrupt the entire EV industry. Honda started by attaching engines to bicycles, but today it stands as the largest engine manufacturer in the world. For decades, Honda has done more than build machines. It has started revolutions and defied expectations with a kind of mischievous brilliance. Now they're moving towards something beyond impressive, and that is hybrid, electricity, and hydrogen-powered engines. But does this engine truly have what it takes to outshine electric vehicles? Is this the start of a new era of innovation in the automobile industry? Stay tuned, because what you're about to discover will leave you stunned. What if Honda just made an engine that doesn't need petrol, doesn't need to be charged, and might even be better than electric cars? Honda's legacy of innovation. Before we get into Honda's innovative switch to hybrid, electricity, and hydrogen engines, we need to take a leap back to how the company started in the first place. One could say Honda began in the dust, scrap metal clattering in the corners of a ruined Japan, smoke still curling up from a war that had torn everything to pieces. It was 1946, and the world wasn't asking for innovation, it was asking for survival. But Soichiro Honda wasn't the kind of man to just patch up broken things. He was the type of man to take what was left, like leftover generator engines and a few bicycle frames, and stitch together something mad, brilliant, and just barely roadworthy. It wasn't pretty, but it moved, and in a place where motion felt like hope. That meant something. That tiny machine, the motorized bicycle that kicked up gravel and turned heads, was the first heartbeat of what would become Honda Motor Company. By 1948, with his partner Takeo Fujisawa keeping the books and reading the markets, Soichiro Honda turned his backyard workshop into a company. It wasn't just any company, it was one that ran on ambition, steel, and the kind of mechanical curiosity that keeps a person up at night sketching engine layouts by the light of a kerosene lamp. In 1949, they built the Dream D-type motorcycle. By the 1950s, Honda had already bulldozed its way into being the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer. But the road was still calling louder than ever. Two wheels were fine for freedom, but when it came to four wheels, that was a revolution. So, in 1963, Honda rolled out the T360 mini truck and the S500 sports car. These cars were small, efficient, twitchy little things with a kind of spring-loaded energy. The S500, with its high-revving engine and motorcycle spirit, was like a shot of adrenaline straight to the chest of Japan's growing car culture. Then came the 1970s, and the oil crisis. Gas prices shot through the roof. American muscle cars guzzled fuel like frat boys at a keg party, and the government was suddenly breathing down everyone's neck about emissions. Most automakers dragged their feet, bolted on half-baked fixes, and slapped on cheap band-aids. But Honda showed up with something that looked like science fiction. In 1972, they introduced the CVCC engine. It burned cleaner, ran smoother, and didn't need a catalytic converter to meet US emission laws. The 1975 Honda Civic, powered by that engine, sailed right past Detroit's coughing dinosaurs and into the hearts of American drivers, looking for a car that wouldn't break the bank or the planet. The Civic wasn't just a car, it proved you could be smart, scrappy, reliable, and fun. But Honda didn't stop there. In 1989, they introduced something strange and wonderful called VTEC. It stood for variable valve timing and lift electronic control, but all you needed to know was this. It made engines that felt like Jekyll and Hyde, quiet and calm at low RPMs, ferocious and furious when you pushed the pedal. The engine came alive, literally, as if a second soul kicked in above 5,000 RPM. It was wizardry, and it turned humble Hondas into cult classics. Tuners and street racers took notice. Suddenly, Honda Civics were eating up back roads and embarrassing cars twice their price on weekend drag strips. And then there was the NSX. In 1990, Honda launched a supercar that didn't need a European badge to prove it belonged. With an aluminum body, a mid-mounted V6, and suspension tuned with help from none other than Ayrton Senna, the NSX made Ferrari blink. It was low, lean, and deadly precise. But more than that, it was reliable. You could actually drive it without fearing an engine meltdown or gearbox tantrum. It was everything a supercar wasn't supposed to be, and better for it. Even at the height of their performance game, Honda didn't lose sight of the bigger picture. They knew the future wasn't just about speed, it was about survival, as always. So, in 1999, when SUVs ruled the roads and gas flowed like water, Honda dropped the Insight, a strange, spaceship-shaped two-seater that ran on a tiny engine and electric motor. It was the first hybrid sold in the US. While Toyota's Prius would go on to dominate the headlines, Honda's Insight was the real trailblazer, getting over 70 miles to the gallon and showing the world that efficiency could be engineered, not just hoped for. But while other companies plastered green labels on their ads, Honda quietly went to work on something even crazier, and that is hydrogen. In 2002, they introduced the FCX, a fuel cell car that emitted nothing but water vapor. By 2008, they had the FCX Clarity, which was available in limited numbers but looked and drove like a real car. And while they were working on clean fuel, they were also building robots, actual walking, talking, gesturing robots. Asimo, first unveiled in 2000, could walk upstairs, carry trays, and wave like a tiny astronaut in a spacesuit. Then the 2010s came, and everyone jumped on the electric bandwagon. Tesla was on the rise. Legacy automakers scrambled to catch up, and Honda played it quiet. They improved their hybrids, dabbled in EVs, but they didn't chase headlines. Instead, they waited, planned, built partnerships. And then came 2023. Honda, alongside General Motors, announced a serious push into hydrogen fuel cell systems. That same year, they announced the 2024 CR-V, which is a plug-in hybrid that runs on both electricity and hydrogen. Now, this engine is quite clearly innovative, but what exactly prompted Honda to consider making an engine that is partly fueled by hydrogen? Keep watching because you don't want to miss the next part of this video. Why Honda is considering hydrogen-based vehicles. Electric vehicles have become the face of modern automotive innovation, with policy support from governments worldwide pushing the boundaries of electric mobility, and for good reason. This is especially because EVs provide numerous benefits, from quiet driving and reduced tailpipe emissions to lower operational costs. However, beneath the surface of this electric revolution lies a set of challenges that for some manufacturers are difficult to ignore. While electric vehicles are undeniably cleaner than their gasoline counterparts, they come with a set of limitations that still pose huge hurdles. One of the most glaring issues is the degradation of batteries over time. Batteries lose capacity with each charge cycle, meaning the driving range of EVs diminishes as the car ages. This issue leads to concerns about the long-term viability of electric vehicles, especially as drivers start to see reduced performance. Another major drawback is the reliance on rare earth metals like cobalt, lithium, and nickel, which are all materials essential to the production of batteries. The mining of these metals has raised huge environmental and ethical concerns, from the pollution generated during extraction to the human rights abuses that often accompany mining practices. As demand for electric vehicles grows, so does the pressure on these resources, raising questions about the sustainability of the entire EV ecosystem. Things don't end there. What is probably the most pressing issue for many potential EV buyers is range anxiety. Despite the growing number of charging stations, long trips in electric cars can still be stressful, as drivers have to plan charging stops carefully, sometimes waiting hours for a full charge. Fast charging stations are improving, but the reality is that EVs are still slow to charge compared to how quickly a gas-powered vehicle can refuel. Even with incentives like tax credits, the high upfront cost of electric vehicles remains a big barrier for many consumers. In addition, the cost of EVs, even with governmental incentives, remains high. While some models are becoming more affordable, the price of the batteries, which make up a huge portion of the vehicle's cost, has kept electric cars out of reach for many. Moreover, the infrastructure needed to support a widespread shift to electric vehicles is still a work in progress. In some regions, charging stations are few and far between, and the growing demand for fast charging could overwhelm existing systems. These limitations, like battery degradation, dependence on rare metals, slow charging, and high costs, are the pain points that Honda sees as potential roadblocks for the future of electric vehicles. It's not that the company is against EVs. In fact, it's far from it. But Honda believes that there is a better way forward, one that sidesteps many of the pitfalls that electric vehicles face. Rather than following the electric vehicle trend, Honda has decided to invest in hydrogen, a technology that has been quietly gaining momentum for the past few decades. The company's reasoning is clear. Hydrogen fuel cells offer a range of advantages that solve many of the issues facing electric vehicles today. With hydrogen, there are no long charge times, no reliance on rare earth metals, and no wasteful batteries that degrade over time. A hydrogen-powered vehicle operates similarly to an electric one, but instead of drawing power from a battery, it uses a fuel cell to combine hydrogen with oxygen from the air to produce electricity. The only byproduct of this process is water vapor, which makes hydrogen-powered cars incredibly clean. The simplicity of hydrogen fuel makes it an appealing alternative to both gasoline and electricity, and it could play a pivotal role in the shift towards sustainable transportation. One of the most compelling reasons behind Honda's decision to focus on hydrogen is its refueling speed. Unlike electric vehicles, which can take hours to recharge, hydrogen cars can be refueled in just a few minutes, much like a traditional gas-powered car. This makes them much more convenient for long-distance travel, where quick refueling is essential. With an increasing number of hydrogen refueling stations being built around the world, the infrastructure for hydrogen-powered vehicles is starting to take shape, addressing one of the key obstacles to widespread adoption. Another advantage of hydrogen fuel cells is their ability to offer a longer driving range than most electric vehicles. A hydrogen car can typically travel around 300 to 400 miles on a full tank, which is comparable to the range of a gasoline vehicle. This makes hydrogen vehicles more practical for long trips and could alleviate the range anxiety that plagues electric vehicle owners. But Honda's bet on hydrogen is not just about developing a cleaner alternative to gasoline. It also involves rethinking the entire paradigm of clean energy and mobility. Hydrogen fuel cells represent a potential future where the environmental impact of cars is reduced to virtually zero, and where refueling is as simple as driving to the nearest station. Honda's decision to invest in hydrogen is a reflection of the company's vision for a world where clean, sustainable transportation is within reach for everyone, not just those who can afford expensive electric cars or those living in areas with extensive charging infrastructure. Honda is also drawn to hydrogen because it avoids the environmental and ethical issues associated with battery production. While the extraction of hydrogen is not without its challenges, it can be produced from a variety of sources, including water, natural gas, and biomass. And because hydrogen can be stored and transported, it holds the potential to be a versatile fuel source, capable of powering not just cars, but trucks, buses, and even trains. By focusing on hydrogen, Honda is positioning itself as a leader in the next phase of clean mobility, one that goes beyond the limitations of current electric vehicle technology. However, Honda's vision of hydrogen as the future of clean mobility isn't without its challenges. Stay tuned to find out what these challenges are. Honda's challenges with its hydrogen-powered vehicles, as was mentioned earlier in this video, began in 2015 when Honda introduced the Clarity FCV, a sleek, modern sedan that symbolized the company's vision for the future of mobility. The vehicle boasted impressive specifications, including a range of up to 360 miles on a single tank of hydrogen, which is comparable to gasoline-powered cars, and emitted only water vapor as its byproduct. The Clarity wasn't just another alternative fuel vehicle. It was a glimpse into what many saw as the next frontier in clean, green transportation. Honda's decision to launch the Clarity FCV was a bold move, and the vehicle's design was huge proof of that ambition. The Clarity was futuristic, with flowing lines, a spacious interior, and cutting-edge technology. It was positioned as the car of tomorrow, an environmentally friendly alternative to conventional vehicles without sacrificing performance or comfort. For all intents and purposes, the Clarity was everything that hydrogen-powered vehicles had promised to be. A clean, efficient, and practically zero-emission solution to the world's transportation problems. But things were not exactly rosy for Honda. Despite these promises and the widespread acclaim for its technology, the Clarity ultimately failed to live up to its potential in the marketplace. The reasons for this failure were multifaceted, but at its core, the issue was not with the vehicle itself. The Clarity had the right technology. It had the range, the low emissions, and the efficient fuel cell system. What it lacked, however, was the necessary infrastructure and consumer confidence in hydrogen fuel technology. Honda's struggles with the Clarity weren't so much about whether the vehicle was technologically sound, but whether there was enough public support and infrastructure to make it viable on a large scale. Hydrogen refueling stations were, and still are, few and far between, and this lack of infrastructure created a huge barrier to the adoption of hydrogen-powered vehicles. In a world where consumers are accustomed to the convenience of gasoline stations and the growing availability of EV charging stations, the lack of refueling stations for hydrogen vehicles made the idea of owning a Clarity seem less practical, despite its impressive range and eco-friendly credentials. One of the biggest hurdles Honda has faced in its hydrogen journey is the lack of infrastructure for refueling hydrogen-powered vehicles. Hydrogen fuel stations are not as ubiquitous as gasoline pumps, and their availability is still limited to select regions. As a result, hydrogen-powered cars are mostly confined to areas with a relatively well-established refueling network, such as California, Japan, and a few European countries. In places where hydrogen stations are scarce, drivers are left with the daunting task of finding a refueling station, sometimes with no guarantee that one will be within reach. This issue is compounded by the fact that hydrogen stations are expensive to build and maintain. Unlike EV charging stations, which are relatively inexpensive to install and can be placed at a wide range of locations, hydrogen stations require specialized equipment and infrastructure, which makes their expansion a costly and slow process. Honda's vision for hydrogen-powered vehicles has always relied on the idea of a robust global hydrogen refueling network, one that could make owning and operating a hydrogen car as convenient as refueling a conventional vehicle. However, without widespread investment in hydrogen infrastructure, Honda's efforts are limited to a few key regions where the number of refueling stations remains too low to make hydrogen cars a practical option for most consumers. This lack of infrastructure is probably the biggest barrier to the adoption of hydrogen-powered vehicles. For Honda, overcoming this challenge requires not just technological innovation, but also partnerships with governments, energy companies, and other stakeholders to build the necessary infrastructure. While hydrogen fuel stations are starting to appear in select locations, the road to a global network of hydrogen refueling stations is still a long one, and without it, hydrogen-powered cars are unlikely to gain widespread adoption. Even beyond the physical limitations of hydrogen refueling infrastructure, Honda faces another huge challenge: changing public perception of hydrogen fuel. Unlike electric vehicles, which have benefited from a combination of government incentives, environmental advocacy, and celebrity endorsements, hydrogen-powered vehicles have struggled to find the same level of support and visibility. That's not all. The rise of electric vehicles has been backed by a well-coordinated push from both automakers and governments, which have invested heavily in developing EV technology and building the necessary charging infrastructure. Electric vehicles have become a symbol of the future, with their silent motors and eco-friendly credentials aligning with global efforts to combat climate change. In contrast, hydrogen-powered vehicles have remained largely on the sidelines, overshadowed by the EV movement. One of the key reasons for this discrepancy is the lack of consumer education about hydrogen fuel. Many people simply don't understand how hydrogen works as a fuel source, or why it's considered a viable alternative to gasoline and electricity. Hydrogen fuel cells have been around for decades, but they've always been something of a niche technology, reserved for experimental projects or specialty vehicles like the Clarity. Public awareness of the benefits of hydrogen as a fuel source is limited, and until that changes, consumers are likely to be hesitant about adopting hydrogen-powered vehicles. Moreover, the fact that hydrogen fuel cells are not yet widely available in consumer vehicles makes it difficult for the average person to experience the technology firsthand. EVs, by comparison, are becoming increasingly common, with more and more drivers able to test drive or even own electric vehicles. Without this direct exposure, the public remains skeptical about the feasibility of hydrogen-powered cars as a mainstream solution. Government policy has also played a huge role in the success of electric vehicles, with many countries offering incentives for EV buyers, building charging infrastructure, and setting ambitious emissions reduction targets. Unfortunately for Honda, hydrogen-powered vehicles have not received the same level of attention from governments, especially in countries where EVs are already dominating the market. While some governments, particularly in Japan, South Korea, and parts of Europe, have recognized the potential of hydrogen fuel cells and have begun to invest in high-D infrastructure, the global focus remains firmly on electric vehicles. In many cases, government incentives for hydrogen vehicles are limited, and the lack of policy support has further hindered the growth of hydrogen fuel cell technology. Without stronger government backing, Honda and other manufacturers are left to shoulder the costs of developing hydrogen vehicles and building the necessary infrastructure on their own. In short, while the Clarity FCV demonstrated that Honda had successfully created a hydrogen-powered car that could hold its own against traditional gasoline-powered and electric vehicles, the lack of infrastructure and lingering safety concerns kept the car from reaching the mass market. Now, there is no doubt that Honda is big on innovation, as is evident with the company's use of hydrogen. But what plans does the company have for future engines? Stick around to find out. Honda's future plans for innovative engines reflect its commitment to pushing boundaries. Honda has never been content with simply following the status quo. Instead, the company has continually sought to break new ground, introducing groundbreaking technologies and engineering solutions that have not only transformed the industry but also redefined what consumers can expect from their vehicles. Looking forward, Honda's ambitions for the future of engine technology are no less ambitious. The company's ongoing quest for innovative solutions is guided by a clear vision, which is to create engines that are not just more powerful and efficient, but also more environmentally friendly. As global awareness of climate change continues to rise and governments around the world implement stricter emissions regulations, Honda is committed to developing engines that minimize environmental impact while maintaining the performance and reliability for which the company is known. This vision has shaped Honda's strategies and will continue to define the company's direction in the coming years. Rather than abandoning internal combustion engines altogether, Honda is focusing on developing hybrid and hydrogen-powered engines alongside its electric vehicle offerings. Honda's future plans include expanding its hybrid engine lineup, building on the success of its Clarity Hybrid and the popular Insight sedan. Hybrid engines, which combine traditional internal combustion engines with electric motors, offer a balance between power, fuel efficiency, and reduced emissions. Honda's engineers are working to refine hybrid technologies to improve fuel economy, reduce emissions further, and make the transition to fully electric vehicles as smooth as possible for consumers. Wait, there's more. In addition to hybrids, Honda is also investing heavily in hydrogen fuel cell technology. Hydrogen-powered engines produce zero emissions, with only water vapor as a byproduct, making them one of the most environmentally friendly engine technologies available. Honda's commitment to hydrogen fuel cell development is demonstrated by the release of its Clarity fuel cell vehicle, which boasts impressive range and performance. However, while hydrogen-powered vehicles offer huge environmental benefits, they face challenges related to infrastructure and public perception, as discussed earlier. Nevertheless, Honda's continued focus on hydrogen-powered engines reflects the company's belief that fuel cells could play a major role in the future of clean transportation. Although the transition toward electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles is an undeniable trend, Honda has not given up on the internal combustion engine, ICE, just yet. Instead, the company is focused on making its ICEs as clean and efficient as possible. Honda is actively working on next-generation engines that will meet or exceed increasingly stringent emissions regulations without sacrificing performance or driving enjoyment. One of the key areas where Honda is focusing its efforts is in improving the fuel efficiency and emissions of its internal combustion engines. The company has already made huge strides in this area with the development of its Earth Dreams technology, which has been implemented in many of Honda's newer models. Earth Dreams engines utilize advanced technologies such as turbocharging, direct fuel injection, and variable valve timing to improve fuel economy and reduce emissions while maintaining the performance and reliability that Honda is known for. So, do you believe that with these new engines, Honda is at the forefront of the next era of automobile vehicles? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.